This meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Logan,
Here.
Commissioner Dean. Here. Commissioner Shertliff,
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Mayor Collins,
Here.
and from CMS, Jim Cairns.
Here. Would you rise with the flag of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, Mr. Thomas, what we're doing is each commissioner and myself will ask 2 questions each.
Okay.
And at the end of the formal questions, you have a little slot to ask questions if you have any. And we'll move forward from there.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to think I'm being rude. I have to sneak out a little early because I have to go to the Capitol. So if I do have to move in the last few minutes, I'll watch the last your answers of the last couple of questions that I haven't missed those.
Fair enough.
All right, we will now start with Commissioner Logan. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Thomas, the first question is on planning. Can you tell us about your experience developing, documenting, and implementing strategic plans and succession plans? Describe how you will develop an overall strategic plan for the city and how you will develop and implement succession plans for key positions such as the city manager and department heads.
So a lot of questions. So my experience with planning on a strategic level is mainly based in the military, working on strategic plans for combat operations, combat deployments, et cetera. Going into the city of Amity, most of our plans were already up to date. The first plan I worked on was for an emergency operations plan for contingency planning in the event of natural disasters and natural hazards. So I was a component of the county's plan, and I presented the city's portion of that. So in that capacity, I worked with my city council, my public works department, and my law enforcement personnel to determine what a good response plan would be to most general hazards and working through that process. We then submitted that to the county, and it was accepted by the county and integrated into their plan. We've been using our water plan and our sewer. I'll back up. We're using our water plan currently to address issues with our water infrastructure and prioritizing projects that we can accomplish with our water infrastructure. I've just presented, along with my contract city engineers, a wastewater facilities plan to the council, which took about a year and a half worth of work in order to identify all the necessary sewer upgrades that we need for our community. It's going to be somewhere between an $11 to $20 million project, depending on which option my commission chooses, my counselors, I should say, choose. And we've been working on that process for some time now. So those, I believe, are the aspects of planning I have. As far as succession planning, I have recently hired in a public works department head in my community. My public works department head had been serving the community for about 7 years, walked in one morning and said, here's my 2 weeks notice. I got hired by a different community down the road. And we've managed to, with my mayor's assistance, I've managed to work with reprioritizing council needs to ensure that our public works team that was remaining, because I have a 3-person team, so I was down to 2 people, was able to accomplish all the needs of the community for the time that it took us to hire someone. We also ran into the problems of our community having a very tight budget. We often cannot get commensurate salaries to those that are of other communities. So we had to work on some ingenious ways of encouraging people to come into our city and apply, going through different work source organizations, maybe reworking how water certifications, at least in Oregon, work. So we could have a status where you could get hired and then work your way to the next level of certification for water treatment, et cetera. I'm happy to state that within the last 2 weeks, we managed to hire that individual, and he should be starting this week, actually. So that works. As far as a succession planning for city manager, I have been working with my mayor and my council and my staff to ensure that all the knowledge that's in my head is presented in a manner that can be easily digested by my council and my mayor, so that they can execute the minimum necessary operations of the city during my departure, and then as well as work with them to that they can continue to perform at the level that's expected of them going forward, with as much knowledge as I can give them, knowing full well that there's always going to be something that after I depart or there's a changeover, you're going to be like, oh, I wish I should have told him that, or et cetera, et cetera. We found that with our public works department, that he left and failed to do any sort of turnover. So we were took us a couple months to just learn what he was, all that knowledge that he locked in his head. So I've been trying to make sure that all my department heads put basically that sort of succession plan or a checklist or some sort of knowledge based around that they can provide to other to a successor. I think I got all the portions of your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next question is concerning a budget.
Mhm.
So describe your approach to budgeting and budget outcomes. Specifically, do you prefer a centralized approach through one department or decentralized approach where each department takes a bigger role in their budgets? And what was the financial performance of organizations you previously managed?
I'll answer that last one. I've ran budgets for multiple Air Force organizations, in which, being that it was time of global war on terror, when the money was coming pretty quickly, basically anything you wanted you could get, but we still managed to provide very reasonable budget requirements going forward for each fiscal year for the training operations that we were running on behalf of the Air Force Special Operations Command. So we took care of that, and it was to get to your other question, it was very much about departments coming in, bringing in their requests, and then working together to kind of solve the problems with the financial team. So that was the way I worked in the Air Force. Having been in the city of Amity now, they already had a fairly robust budgeting process, which I stepped into. So I didn't see a necessity to change that much. It basically is the department heads provide their wish list to the city treasurer. The city treasurer and our contract CFO work together along with myself to basically hammer out all the budget specifics based on what we see in the consumer price index increases, as well as any costs associated to contracts or services that we're performing that may go up. And then as well as salary and union contracts. And we push that together with the information from the Dream Seed, and then we prioritize working with our department heads as to what exactly they can live with and without based off their priorities. And then we draw a line basically that says this is what we can afford, and the rest of this is going to have to either wait or go somewhere else. What I mean by go somewhere else, meaning we might have to seek grants for that, or loan funding, or some other funding source to get that serviced. Overall, it's been effective. We've gotten clean audits for our budgets the last 3 years that I've been there. So we've done remarkably well. Our staff is very small, but it's mighty, and they do great work to ensure that we have a balanced budget going forward every year that meets the general revenues coming in to the expenditures coming out.
Thank you.
So I'll be taking the third question, and this has to do with sustainability, particularly around conservation, climate, etc. What are some of the ways in which cities like Helena can address sustainability? What would your vision for sustainability be if you were Helena's next city manager?
So this is very similar to the question I was asked by the HCC yesterday during my meeting with them. And I understand that you have many resolutions out there. They've rattled off all the numbers too. I might have to admit I didn't quite catch all those numbers, but I know there's at least 4 of them. I think there are 4 of them that they mentioned for sustainability and environmental impact going forward. And I said to them, what I'll say to you is those are high and mighty goals, but they're achievable. It just depends on what timeline and horizon you're willing to get to those goals, and what you're looking at doing. Personally, for me, sustainability in Helena, I think would be best done in an incremental approach, in which the city works with within its budget and within its capacity, me as the city manager, you as the commissioners, to come up with a plan that will slowly but surely improve meet those goals, but improve the sustainability, environmental friendliness of the community. Things that I mentioned yesterday that I still think would be good opportunities is that fleet vehicle replacement. We know that Ford is ramping up production. Tesla's out there. There's a few other electric vehicle manufacturers. Most of the big three are going electric. So it's not inconceivable to say over time, as each public works vehicle goes in for a repair or replacement, it gets replaced with a 1-for-1 with an electric vehicle. Same could be said for your emergency response vehicles over time, as well as for your police and law enforcement vehicles. I did note it looked like your parking enforcement folks are in little electric golf carts, so it looks like you're already on that path. So that's something that you could do that would slowly ensure that you get more environmentally friendly. As far as other options you can do is, I know you have a wastewater facility upgrade that you're looking at accomplishing in the next 5 to 10 years. You can incorporate green requirements into that, whether it be half the facility has to be run with solar power, or there needs to be a better, each building needs to be insulated to LED standards or LEED standards for environmental friendliness, and you can incorporate that into your design and your build. It may make things more expensive up front, but it would probably offset the cost going forward in the future. The last one, the big one, I think that would need to be addressed, and it would be a joint effort between city staff with me as the manager and as well as with you as the commissioners and the mayor, would be to work with the regional power provider, which you are not attached to. And by that, I mean, there are cities out there that provide their own power. Since you have an outside power source, you need to work with them to ensure that the power coming into the city is green, if that's what you seek. It doesn't seem like, I mean, you still want to do them, but it doesn't seem like it'd be a great idea if you're trying to go green and then the power plant that's providing you the city's power is coughing up coal 3 miles away. So you kind of want to work with them on that. But just because they won't convert over doesn't mean you should try to, you should avoid your opportunities. The last one I would ensure for environmental friendliness and working towards that goal and achieving those requirements is working with your developers, working with your business community to potentially find incentives and or tax breaks or some sort of financial partnership in which charging stations are available to the community, as well as for whether they're also for public use or they're public facilities that are provided or in a partnership, that it encourages people to buy electric vehicles and to use electric vehicles with the accessibility of having a charging station at their disposal. Sometimes that becomes the biggest impediment, is that range issue. People wonder if they're going to find a place to charge. So if you can provide that to them, you may reduce that friction point.
Especially in Montana.
So I think that covers a lot of, I think that covers your points. That I hit all your questions.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you. The fourth question is regarding housing. Lack of affordable housing is a significant issue in Helena and Montana. What is your philosophy and approach to development and infrastructure needs?
Good question, and similar again to the HCC's question yesterday. So what I expressed to them, and I'll tell you as well, it's that the housing and development can be done in multiple different ways. And what I worked on as an intern for the city of Eugene was what they call the multi-use property tax exemption. It encouraged infill, it encouraged development, and what it did is it required developers to, if they built inside a designated downtown core area of the city of Eugene, and then built mixed use and or commercial properties that had a residential element to it, or multi-use family elements like an apartment complex or duplex or something, that if they provided a certain number of workforce level housing units in that development, they would be given a certain amount of tax credits for a set period of time after the completion of the project. That would help some of these developers pencil out their projects as they were coming in there. It helped solve some of the infill issues that they were looking for, and it solved the workforce housing issues that the city of Eugene was looking at. That may not be as appropriate for a city like mine currently in Amity, where we don't have a lot of that opportunity. But for a city like Helena, that may be something that the city staff could present to commission, and commission could vote into as a project that they would be willing to work on. Beyond that, one of the options you can do is smart development. And what I mentioned yesterday, I think it actually went in the paper this morning, was looking at ensuring that the annexation into the city is done smartly as opposed to just to help the developer get something done. It's done in a manner of, okay, do we have the infrastructure in place for this? Can we, to get back to the sustainability, can we do this in a sustainable fashion? Are there opportunities there where we can improve environmental friendliness of the community or ADA compliance or whatever you're seeking in that development? And then work with the developer to ensure that if that property gets annexed in or gets developed, it's done in a way that best benefits the entire community as opposed to just that development. And that could be, to get the housing, it could be a certain amount of ADA accessible and or workforce housing units that are put into the project. I noticed yesterday on the windshield tour that up by, I think it was the Costco Target area up at the North Custer Road, I think it was. You do have a new workforce housing complex that went in. That idea and concept, it can be replicated throughout the city if needed. So I think that's a good start and a good way to go about that process. So I would encourage more of those sort of projects, but done in a way that, well, if we're going to build another one of those sort of units, where can we put it that would best benefit both the workers and the and this community at large?
Thank you.
Number 5, sorry, we were a bit out of order today.
All right.
What has been your experience working with business groups and organizations like our Downtown Helena Initiative and the Business Improvement District? And do you have prior experience working with tax increment financing and urban renewal districts?
Answer the last two right up front. No, I've no experience with urban renewal districts or with the tax tip program that you mentioned, but I will learn quickly and figure it out. The reason for that is in my military career, that was not applicable. In my current community, that is, we're at such an elementary step that's high school, college level. We're still working at grade school level. So maybe in time, my community will get to the need of it for an urban renewal district. That said, I understand the concept and the principles behind them, and if used appropriately, those sort of elements can encourage growth and revitalization to your downtown core or to certain aspects of the city that you wish to see smart development go into. So those are valuable and useful tools if done in an appropriate manner. And I'd be willing to work with those to happen, make those happen to help the city out. That said, my experience with the business community in Amity has been more of a direct engagement process. We have a downtown improvement group. Our Chamber of Commerce is actually, because we're a small enough community, our Chamber of Commerce is run out of the city of McMinnville, which is a city of about this size. So the comparison would be, you have one Chamber of Commerce and it works for East Helena and on all the Helena and all the unincorporated areas of the community as well. That one Chamber of Commerce represents all of them. That's kind of where we are. We're one of the representatives of that Chamber of Commerce. But often that Chamber of Commerce doesn't help our community. So I've done a lot of outreach in the last 3 years in cooperation with my mayor and my council to reach out directly to our business community, tell them, here's what's going on, here's why we're doing things, here's what's happening, here's what you need to know, and just giving them the information that when I was hired, they said they never got from the city. Trying to explain our logic as to why we were doing rate increases, why we were doing this sort of water project, or we were going in this direction. We worked very hard on that. It was not all pleasant. We had a tourism committee that had, for all intents and purposes, gone off the rails a little bit. And we basically broke up with my mayor at the time, and I worked together to disband that tourism committee as part of the, because it no longer followed the city charter. So of what a committee should be and how it should be constituted. So they basically were trying to do the best they could with what they had, but they had kind of gone rogue. So we took that away. But in response, I was working with them to try with the business community, because we're predominantly a tourism based community. I was working with the business community to try and say, okay, this went away, but we'll help you in other aspects to try and encourage business and growth and community development here. I'm proud to say that during my time as city manager in 3.5 years and through the worst part of the pandemics, we opened a Dollar General, which may not be anything for all of you, but for us, that was very huge to get a business like that into our community. And we opened up 2 other local businesses during the depths of the pandemic. So we still managed to get businesses opening while we were, where everyone else was having some economic woes. So I'm very happy about that. And I think a lot of that had to do with the outreach we had. So a lot of that was just meeting with the the representatives of our downtown improvement group, our historical entity, our Friends of the Library, and other community groups, and the business leaders every time I went to a coffee shop or to our restaurant, just answering their questions and telling them what was going on. We started basically a monthly email outreach to them where I relay council information to them and city business to the business community, so they're aware of what's going on in City Hall. And I think all that's improved both the relationship between the business community and the government, as well as with just the overall the economic growth and vitality of the city. The last thing I'll address is that during the depths of the pandemic, we took our coronavirus relief funds. I'm sure you received those as well as a community. We took those and turned them into micro grants / loans that we gave to our community members, to include our businesses, and with the intent that this money would be given to them in this micro grant, micro loan that they could use for any purposes to survive and sustain their business through the worst part of the economic shutdowns of what was that, March, April, May of 2020. And we had many businesses that used that information just to make payroll or to buy inventory or to keep the lights on for a couple of months while they were shut down or otherwise unable to work. And I think they appreciated that we were willing to do that for the community. So that bought us a lot of goodwill, and hopefully there are ways to do that again in the future. So all that talent and knowledge I will bring forward to Helena and work forward in that spirit of cooperation and working together and sharing information with the business community to help build that relationship here. And if it's not been built, and if it has been built, to expand it and grow it going forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
The next question has many parts. I will do my best to go through it slowly. If you could please describe your experience and approach to building trust and credibility with a commission, board, or similar entity. In particular, if you could please describe how you maintain relationships and continuity with commission or board members when there's turnover due to term limits or elections, and your approach to building consensus within a divided board or council.
I'm trying to think of how best to answer that. So my community, I've been there a little over 3 years and 6 months, so just over 3.5 years. I've gone through 4 mayors, and the entire city council that hired me into position in June of 2019 is gone, and it's been replaced at least once, and in some positions, at least those seats have been filled twice now since I took the job. So I'm familiar with the potential churn and turnover in the elected leadership and civic leadership of the community. To that extent, I saw myself in that position as providing the continuity and stability to the city staff to not only make sure that normal city functions were done appropriately, that our processes were followed, that good ideas that came from spurious locations were appropriately dealt with, whether it was, hey, this actually would work and benefit the city, so let's add that to the mix of tools that we have to make things happen in the community, or this is a really good idea, but we can't handle this right now, so we're going to set this aside. And being very frank and open with my council and commission, council and mayor in that process to doing that. It was interesting as my newest mayor took over, and she's a rock star. She's doing great work. Total respect for her. But when she showed up, she went from no government experience to being, hey, I'll run a write-in campaign for city council, to winning the council seat, to you're now council president, to now you're the temporary mayor, to the mayor in about 6.5, 7 months. So she went from 0 to hero pretty quickly. And she came to me after she became the mayor and said, well, tell me what I need to do. And I was like, this isn't how it works. You are the mayor. You're supposed to tell me what your goals are and operations, and I'll make sure it happens to the best of my ability. And she said, well, you're the continuity. It's like, I've been here 3 years. We're in trouble. And she said, well, we'll figure it out together. And I was like, I'm kind of joking, but I was like, this is I said, but I work for you, not the other way around. So it's like, I will tell you what you need to know so that you can make smart, informed decisions, which is what I've done with your 3 predecessors. And in return, I hope that you give me good, honest feedback, as well as a consensus or a concise thought process as to what you're doing. And we made that agreement, and it's been a phenomenal, as to quote Casablanca, it's been a beautiful friendship since then. It works because there's trust built between there. I don't blindside her as the council and the mayor. I work with each of my councilors on the terms that they best choose, whether it's I meet them where they need to be, or I answer their email questions, I take their opportunities, their phone calls. I'm direct with them, but I don't sugarcoat a lot of things, but I also don't hide anything from them. So I think they appreciate that sort of honesty and forthright. But I am known to tell it like it is, and I'll tell them this is not a good idea, or this is my recommendation that we don't do this. But if you insist, you are the elected officials and I work for you, so I will execute that policy to the best of my ability to make it happen. But I feel it's imperative that I tell you the potential, as we used to say in the military, branches and sequels that you may see if you take this course of action. These are the things that I see in my short time in the city as to what may happen going forward. You may get this sort of result. Do you want to take that chance? And if they're willing to do that, then I will go forward and make that executed as best as possible. I think on the flip side, it's also my job to protect the staff as best as possible from just random spurious thoughts so that they can maintain priorities on what they need to do. In such a small town as ours, my city staff and my city council are neighbors, they're friends, they've gone to school together, they grew up together, they live next door to each other. There's they barbecue together, so they all know each other. So I understand that sort of connectivity. I don't mind it at all. They're free to do whatever they want. And my only request to my mayor and council, and my current mayor has been very good about honoring this, is that if it's city business related, at least keep me in the loop somehow so I know what's going on, so I can at least address the issue with my staff to figure out where it fits in our priorities, the city goals or the city needs and our budget constraints, so I can act appropriately. If you're going to talk to these folks outside of City Hall, fantastic, do whatever you want, but I need to know kind of what's going on, so I'm not blindsided by saying this is the way I've been told and this is the way I think we're going to go out in this direction, and then say, well, no, actually I talked to Counselor X and we're going in a different direction. Like, wait a second, and that's very jarring and unsettling to the staff. So as long as I'm aware of it, we can integrate those sort of things and work through those sort of issues. In my role as city administrator for the city of Amity, I have one boss. That boss is the mayor. I will meet and work with the council as much as possible, but I report to the mayor directly. So I keep her informed of everything that's going on. There's no hidden agenda, no hidden information. She knows she basically knows everything I know. And in return, we have that trust where she helps keep me appraised of where she thinks the council is going and where they think we're going to have as the next steps. So it works well. I think my staff appreciates that they feel they can reach out and talk to the council can talk to them. But if it's city business related, they know to kind of keep me in a loop, work through me, keep me informed, so I can direct the staff in the best way possible to ensure that, as I said yesterday in the meeting with the HCC, that we keep all the salmon swimming in the same direction and just keep it going appropriately. So that's how I see my role going forward, and kind of how I would address working with all of you if I was sitting as your city manager.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Question number 7. Please describe your change management process and the outcome of significant organization changes you've implemented. Include an example of how you were able to overcome resistance to change.
I'm sorry, I was just whacked my knee.
It's worse.
So yeah, big guy, small desk. I'm sorry, can you repeat part of that question? I missed some of that because I was massaging my shin there.
I did the same thing last night. Totally understand. All right. Question number 7. Please describe your change management process and the outcome of significant organization change you implemented. Include an example of how you were able to overcome resistance to change.
There's a lot of them. Obviously, through 4 mayors, that's a lot of change in a small community like ours. So I work with each one of my mayors, as I said, going, this isn't the way it works. You are in charge. You run the show. You tell me how to operate. I'll operate the system. You tell me what trains to run. I'll make the trains run on time. That's kind of the process. So I would have those meetings with my mayors, and that was it worked very well to ensure that I knew what change was coming and they knew what change was coming. As working with the department heads, as I mentioned earlier, with the 2-week notice, it's kind of the surprise 2-week notice with my public works director. I sat down with my mayor and the council, as well as with my public works team, And we hashed out like, okay, here are the priorities as I see fit as the city manager and city administrator, what I think we can do with just 2 people in public works for the time being. Granted, as you're well aware, we have 8 people on our staff, so 3 public works. So I lost a third of my public works force. So with the 1/3 loss, here's what we can accomplish. And I said, so these sort of things are going to have to go by the wayside until I can hire someone else into the position. These are things that are nice to haves, but not need to haves, such things as repainting the curbs, emptying the trash cans on a weekly basis. Maybe they have to go to bi-weekly, hanging new banners on the light poles in the downtown core for the new season or whatever it is. Those may have to wait. We may just need to leave the banners that we have up right now. But these are the things that we will ensure that we get done. We meet DEQ qualities, which is Department of Environmental Quality for Oregon, and EPA standards for water service. The sewer system works. We fix our leaks. The road gets paved as best as possible whenever there's potholes or other issues. And these are the priorities I see them. And do you agree or do you want changes? And between the mayor and council, we figured out what those priorities were, and we were able to sustain our public works operations until this new person was hired in the last 2 weeks. So that change, I think we managed fairly well. I also brought in my public works department in hiring the new person so that they had a vote in the process. They were on the interview panel. They did the tours with the individual, much like you're doing with us here. So there was an opportunity for them to figure out whether this guy would be a good fit into into our public works. So, and I told them flat out, I was like, if you have even a second or moment's hesitation about this and hiring this individual or any individual in the public works, I won't hire him. I just will not take that chance on having you 2 guys here simply to fill that hole. Luckily, these guys were they liked this guy and they thought he was a good fit, and they were willing they gave me the nod to say, we're okay with you hiring this guy. I was like, okay, I kept my word and we'll do that. So that analogy and that story kind of gets to the point of being open, transparent, straightforward with the people that are both above and below you as to what these changes will entail. Being an honest broker between both the staff and the commissioners, and then additionally working with them to keep your word as to what you're doing. If you say you're going to give them a voice in the hiring process, you give them a voice in the hiring process. So I think they appreciated and valued that process. The last thing I would add would be to change in the community at large, and that's mostly done through sheer volume of information and sharing and transparency you can give with the community. We upped our social media footprint while we were there. We revitalized our newsletters to a certain extent. We've added an Instagram page. We've put our community meetings fortuitously because of the pandemic. We've, much like you're doing here, we put everything on Zoom meetings. So we just took those Zoom meetings and now we're putting those Zoom meetings onto a YouTube channel so people can watch the meetings at a later date. They'll open that transparency. And as far as the community, they now see us listening to them, honoring their requests, engaging with them, providing them information, explaining to them what's going on and why. And we've seen in our annual city surveys for over the last 3 years, a gradual uptick in community satisfaction with departments and with overall community services. We've seen a gradual uptick in the quality of and responsiveness to the community, to our elected officials. The community very much appreciates the current mayor and council because they see this transparency that we say something to City Hall, the city council is listening to us and they're trying to respond in kind to do something that helps out the community, which for many years they just didn't have. So that allowed us the grace and opportunity to make these changes because they knew we would tell them why and the reason for it. I established a frequently asked questions page on our city website. It's still there. I freely admit I don't think I've updated it in a little bit, but we basically explained the whole reason for our water infrastructure project, our water rates increases, our sewer problems, and just spelled it all out there for them as to why we were doing what we were doing. And I think the community appreciated that as well. And that information helped them get through the change. Did they all appreciate it? No. Do I still get yelled at because of it? Yes. But they at least appreciate the fact that we weren't just making decisions as they would see in the blind. So I think that engagement with the community is that last piece too. And that's something I also take pride in that we've done as a community, hand in glove, the council, myself and the staff working together to get that out there. So I think that gets to your questions. I hope I've answered them all. Okay.
And question number 8.
Yes, sir.
The city of Helena wants to modernize, improve business processes, and to proactively address changing community needs. This includes updating legacy systems such as the financial enterprise resource planning software and improving business processes for the project planning and management, communication, data transfer, and management. Please describe your experience implementing new systems and business processes. Be specific as to the systems or processes you've implemented and the outcome of those efforts.
Business processes in the city. Well, I can refer to one I did in the military, which was we totally overhauled our educational process for Special Operations Command in the Air Force, and we rewrote our entire training syllabus to address that, and that required a lot of coordination from the Pentagon all the way down to the deployed expeditionary flying units that this was happening. And the trick I learned from that was it was a lot of communication, a lot of open transparency, and a lot of negotiations with all the different entities to ensure that those transitions were, and this kind of gets back to the change and some of the other questions, that those were all done transparently and as openly as possible. Financially, at least in the military, as I mentioned, the budgeting was just, we want this money, can you give it to us? And they're like, yeah, sure, here you go. Try not to spend all of it. In the city of Amity, what we found for the business processes, and one I can think of specifically, is we redid our water billing service. And we had an antiquated system that was probably 20 plus years old for water billing service. And these were tied to antiquated meters that were throughout the city, spin dial analog meters, and they very mechanical based, and they were not reading the appropriate amount of water going through the system anymore. They were also falling apart. We were having to replace a lot of them, and we were doing this piecemeal. So we took ARPA money that we got from the feds. So it was at no cost to the city, and we basically replaced all of the water meters. The new water meters now had a better read system and a better quality of, or better accuracy in the water that was going through there. And we found out that was great. We were all good, but then we realized all this information couldn't go into our billing system. So we still had a problem with the billing. So we took a little bit more ARPA money and we totally redid the water billing system. And the way we made this happen is that we told the community that you're getting these new water meters. Some of you will actually see rate increases, but most of you will now see a rate decrease, because we're going to give you in the software, we can build in basically a gratis amount of water, 2,000 gallons that will go into your base rate. And we figured that amount out with the help of outside experts. The Oregon Association of Water Utilities came in and did a rate survey for us and said, yep, this is about what you could give as far as water. So working with OAWU, this rate study, we were able to say, okay, because we have these new meters, we now can give you this free water. This free water will offset the fact that these meters are now reading more accurately, judging the flow going through your system, and your rates may go up. So this kind of all neutralizes everything. And as far as rate increases, some will go up, some will go down, but we'll get more revenue. We have more accuracy, and our system is now improved. That took us took us about a week of downtime on the system. So we had to choose a week in which we were not either billing or otherwise running software. And I took my 2 staff basically off the rotation, off the front desk, to get the training necessary. So there was about a week there where I was running the cash register, taking bills, running parking payments, and other clerical work at the front desk just to keep things rolling. And my mayor was supportive at the time for that, different mayor, and then the one I have currently. And we made it work. So a lot of getting to the point of changing those business processes is making sure you have the funding source available for it, explaining to the community and the staff and those that are being affected by this change why you're doing it, keeping that information there. As I mentioned from my military time, is making sure all the players are involved in the process and get into the negotiation of that, so everyone feels that their voice is heard and that that everyone's concerns are addressed, and then taking the time necessary and scheduling that implementation process, and realizing that in that transition, you're going to have to re-wicker some people or reassign people to make sure that's happening. There may be some temporary disturbances, but it's for the greater good. And then finally, the last piece, at least in the military, was like, hey, give us the money. For us, we had the ARPA funds. Granted, those funds may have all been expended for the city of Helena. So in the future, maybe we need to figure out, before we can do all this, we need to figure out what funding source we can get for improving the financial software. Maybe that's we have to go out for a grant, or we've already had this money squirreled away in a rainy day fund within the city budget. Or maybe we can't do this for 2 years, but we're going to set aside the requisite, half the money this year, half the money next year in the general fund to pay for this on the third year when we get to that point. And that's part of that budgeting process we talked about a little bit before. But it's making sure all those components are fit together. And with that, I think you can easily, well, not easily, but you can skillfully implement new technology changes and business practices into your system. I mean, we did it in Amity, and it seems to be working fairly well with our water utility billing. It's now in the mid 20th century, well, mid 21st century process. I think we got the software up to about the 2018 level. So we're good there, and it has automatic updates, so it works very well. And we can, so I think the community appreciates that too. After the initial brouhaha about, oh my God, my water bill is going to go up. I think they realize now that there's now stability in that bill. We can present to them new information. There's leak detection, and our billing system now also tracks trend items. So we can, we've eliminated, this is one last comment. We eliminated that. Well, last year I didn't use this amount of water, and this is ridiculous, and I must have a leak, or you guys are off. I'm like, no, actually, here's the spreadsheet. Here's what you used last month. Here's the bar graph that shows you everything you use from here. You're actually right on par with what you used last year. So no, this isn't a problem. You're just getting billed what you should get billed. I think that shut down a lot of the spurious complaints and noises we had from the community about our billing software. And now people are accepting, like, yeah, they're doing a good job. This is accurate. This is good. We appreciate this. So in the end, I think it's been a success for us and something that could be implemented for those businesses, software solutions for Helena.
Thank you, sir. Question 9.
Uh-huh.
Leadership style, delegating and sharing authority. How do you describe your leadership style? Tell us why it is important to understand your leadership style. How do you determine the most effective leadership style for a particular job, organization, or situation? And then a follow-up would be, please provide an example of how you delegate or share authority to develop or empower your staff.
Okay. So the first part is my leadership style and how I lead my folks. I will say that my leadership style is constantly evolving and improving, and it's changed significantly from my days in the military to my time now as a experienced city manager, having been through a lot in the last 3 years, as have many city managers throughout the country. I jokingly will say, in the military, it was very easy. If I snapped my fingers, things would happen. Nowadays, if I snap my fingers, I better be keeping time to the music because nothing will happen. So a lot of the leadership style has changed in the fact that it's not command directed or orders. It's now encouragement and empowerment. So the evolution has been making sure that my folks feel empowered and included in all the decision making. The specific example I can get to you is the one I said earlier about public works. I brought my team in. I brought my 2 public works guys in and said, you're going to be a part of this process. And if you don't like this guy, you can, I won't hire him. I'm the hiring authority, so I could overrule you. But if you don't like him, I'm not going to do this, or her. Just happened to be a guy that we hired. And that they appreciated that fact, and they felt they were empowered and engaged and valued in the hiring process. And when they told me what they thought of the individual, I listened to them and I acted accordingly. So I think that's a specific example to get to, but I think that's overall how one should work in these leadership positions in these large organizations. You need to empower your personnel, you need to make sure your staff feels heard, encouraged, and valued. And when they make opinions or suggestions, you consider and incorporate their expertise and their know-how. I freely admit that I'll be the person in charge, but I may not know everything. So I'm going to be leaning on my department heads and the senior staff. And since she's sitting here, Danae and other folks to get things done and to ask for their opinions. So I freely admit that if I take this position, the first 60 to 90 days, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. And it's not so much so here, hope you're listening. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and the questions aren't so much that I distrust what you're doing, or I'm micromanaging, or I otherwise don't believe in what you're doing. It's a lot of questions to ask. How do you do this? Why do you do this? So I can get smarter, so I understand what you're doing. So then I can turn around and better advocate for you with the community or with you as commissioners. or with the budget or with the state or whoever we need to work with or a developer so I can best do the job that I'm assigned to do. And that's becoming smart on the systems and the processes that are handled within the city. And it also helps me make a better informed decision of what things need to be changed, improved, modified, or can better just remain the same because they work efficiently. I don't believe that, as many commanders in the military used to do, just come in and make changes so they could get promoted and move on. I was very much about, I'm not a visionary per se. I'm more of an optometrist. I like to make your vision work. So that's how I try and approach my job. As far as day-to-day leadership, again, a very small staff. We all wear a lot of different hats. I encourage my folks to make informed decisions. And what I try and do with them is to give them the left, right limits that they can work within, and then let them go. And if they make an informed decision that's not malice, negligence, or criminal behavior, backing them up. And there's been a lot of times where I've had my staff get yelled at by community members, and I'll walk out from my office, since it's not a very far walk, and just be like, yeah, what's going on? And they look at me and they, oh, well, your staff's doing X, Y, and Z. I said, yeah, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. But that's what I don't like that. Like, I don't care if you like it or not. That's the process, and that's how we're handling it. Now, if you have a significant complaint about how we're doing this, I'll be happy to work with you. But otherwise, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And I think my staff appreciates the fact that I'm not going to throw them under the bus every chance there is to make the score points or political points or position. That has run me afoul of a lot of the community members. I think there are a lot of community members that I've probably brushed the wrong way because they didn't get what they wanted out of the community. But at the end of the day, I support that decision because my staff was acting in the best interest of the city. I'm acting in the best interest of the city, and we're trying to protect the city and move forward in a thoughtful and measured way. As far as leadership from the commissioners down to me as the staff, we discussed a lot of that. And I know in a manager position to this, I'm more responsive to all of you. As I mentioned before, with my relationship currently, I report directly to my mayor. So we have routine meetings. We talk a lot. I don't blindside her. So I would do the same with you. I will do my best to never blindside you on how, so you can make informed decisions, that you know what's coming up. And just be that honest broker between the leaders, the elected leadership, which is all of you, and then the city staff. But I definitely would like to see city staff feel empowered and emboldened to make smart, rational decisions based on their expertise, and know that they're going to have leadership that will support them going forward. It may be a process to a very short tenure, but that's how I would approach the business.
Now, final question.
Yes, sir. Take care. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any questions for us?
Yes.
Or anything you'd like to add to the interview?
Well, I do have a couple questions. The first one is, I know you've had a lot of churn. It didn't take too long to go through the newspaper websites and even mentioned in the news article yesterday that you've had basically 2 city managers go through in basically 2 years. You've had an interim for about a year. The interim is also one of my colleagues and competitors for this position. So I guess my question for you is, what do you want to see out of this position? What do you see as a successful city manager, so that in 18 months, you're not doing this process over again?
Me personally, I want to be able to see projects get done.
Mhm.
And I want some stability. Because when you have stability in the authority, in the city manager, you have a sense of belonging from the staff.
Mhm.
Staff are calmer, they want to work for you, they want to do what's right. That's where I'm at. I'll turn it over to the rest of the commissioners.
I would briefly add, I would agree with what the mayor has said. I also think Helena and the rest of our state is changing rapidly. So I'd like to see some, strategic planning and vision and meaningful dialogue about what is happening in our city, where we're going, and how we're going to get the most effect.
I'd say part of the churn that you probably read about, dealt a fair bit with the charter and responsibilities of the commission and the responsibilities of the manager, making sure that we understand each of those roles well, and we operate in those roles, and I think, I think that's gonna provide a significant measure of success, and I certainly echo what the mayor and Commissioner Reed said as well, and I think strategic planning and succession planning are going to be pretty critical in the next 2 years, and so those are some things I'm looking for a successful city manager.
And also to echo what the mayor and the other commissioners have said, completed budgets on time and under budget. But also to looking at possibly doing a SWOT analysis, helping us find those strengths and weaknesses, those opportunities and those threats. To kind of almost have a crystal ball looking 20, 30 years in the future, but also to meeting the challenges of today. And if you see challenges or opportunities, not just for the commission, the staff and the city of Helena, that'd be something that I'd like to see as well.
Interesting. So on kind of a follow-up question to that for all of you, since it's my turn to ask you questions, where have you done goal setting? Do you do annual goal settings and meetings where you basically chart out or map out your 5-year, 10-year desires, not a strategic plan per se, but just a goal setting session where everyone gets in and hammers out a kind of what they want to do?
Yeah, we've done something like that for the city manager from the commission. Met with the city manager. We've had planning sessions where our where would you like to be in the next year? Where would you like to be in the next 5 years? And we've gone through all of that, yes, with the various city managers.
Okay.
I would add, though, that we have not, as a commission, had the opportunity yet to talk about our goals.
Oh, that's.
And shared goals. Well, I think there's two different ways to answer your question. So just on the other side, we have not, it's been a year. So we've had, it's been an interesting year with a lot of change. So we have not had the opportunity to come up with shared goals among the commission. I know it's come up recently. Commissioner Logan has mentioned it. It's something we'd like to move towards. But we do not have that yet. But as the mayor indicated, there is a process for setting goals with the manager.
I think the last effort that we went toward goal setting was, I believe, when the previous city manager first came to the city, and it was with two other commissioners that are not seated now. And so this particular commission, as Commissioner Reed said, has not had the opportunity to sit down and sort of set those goals and prioritizing. We've lost a city manager and a commissioner, and he passed away in the summer. So it has been quite that's been a hurdle to overcome to try to get toward goal setting.
So I hear you on two different types of goal settings. Yes, I would appreciate a goal setting session between as part of feedback. I would assume that if I take this position, if offered, that you would set up like a 6-month probationary period of, okay, in 6 months, we want to kind of see this. And if you achieve this in 6 months, you stay. If not, thank you. No, clean break, no harm, no foul. And I would appreciate that, like on an annual feedback goal setting. What I was also so I appreciate that, that'd be helpful, but also, for instance, the city of Amity, we send out an annual city survey with our utility bills, where we ask the community, what do you think of these things? What would you like to see the city spend its time, resources, and your tax dollars on in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? We get their inputs, and then we sit down and we, as a council, with the administrator and some of the staff, in this case, would probably be department heads in this city. We have an all-day session where we basically hammer this. We go through the survey results, and then we match the survey results to what we're going to budget, as well as to the goals. And then we kind of figure out what we're going to accomplish for the next year, 2-year, 5-year plan. And that kind of helps us align everything. And so that's it. Have you done something to that effect where you get community input, where you figure out what you get their voice in the matter, and then you kind of hammer that out into what your objectives are going to be going forward?
Not in the sense you articulated, but we have all our meetings and whatever we do are open. And so we do get community input on an ongoing basis, because every meeting or so we have on our website where they can go there if they wanted to ask questions or they wanted us to look into one direction. They will write us an email there and it will come straight to us.
Mhm.
Or they will come to the meeting and present their ideas or their concerns or whatever it is. So that's the process we use.
Okay, and that works, how we also do those community feedback. I mean, I get emails directly from the community all the time. Hey, Mike, what about this? Or they just randomly goes into a community city account. My mayor also gets a lot of emails directly from individuals. And they come in and they're now coming into our city council meetings and expressing their opinions because they realize council will listen to them. Hasn't always been the case. But what we try to do is we measure those comments that come in. And I mentioned earlier about spurious comments and other ideas is that we try and match those to the goals that we've set. So, and to our plans, and I'll get to plans in a second, but we look at it in such a way like, okay, this is a great idea, but we've already kind of set these goals based off the survey and information in our budget for the next 5 years to do these sort of things. If that fits in, then we'll try and incorporate it. If it doesn't, maybe that's something we budget for next year or the next goal. So we're not constantly going, as we'd say in the military, squirrel, and go off in a different direction. We're kind of keeping everything measured. We're listening to you and we're like, okay, we can do that now. That's within our goals, our priorities, or our budget. But in the future, or that's not, but maybe we can do that in the future. Certain things that we've looked at in the city of Amity is improving our sidewalks, and sidewalks are about $1 million a block. So is how do you get the funding for $1 million a block? Okay, well, we'll start that process now, but that's going to take a couple of years. So we put that in the goal for a 5-year goal. Or I appreciate city strategic planning and stuff is that I saw this in the military and I see this in a lot of big cities. You put together an outside entity and you get a contractor or somebody comes in and they do this great research and everything, and they present you a 3-inch thick binder, 3-ring binder that's 500 pages thick on your city objectives and a strategic plan, and it goes on a shelf and collects dust until you do the next one. Occasionally you may reference it, occasionally you don't, but for the most part it's pie in the sky stuff that you can't actually execute unless you have all these things go the right way. So it's ensuring that when you do a strategic plan like that, that you have objectives along the way that you can meet that are measurable and accomplishable through budgeting or city staff talent or work that can get to that end state. And when we talk about plans and city plan, that also goes in the goals. So if you have this 20-year strategic plan, your goals in the city surveys all kind of mesh together. So it's kind of one seamless stream. So that's kind of where I see that process. And I know this is more questions for you, but that's when I was asking that question, it's kind of, that's what I was wondering if you do that, or if this is something you do differently, or if I'm off the rails, or that's great. That's an Oregon thing or something.
Off the rail, just that we do get a fair share of participation during our meetings.
Yes.
And through our website, where we have a form that's specifically for something of that nature that you're speaking about.
Okay. I guess my last question is where do you see, you obviously have sustainability as an issue and homelessness, but so those two aside, where do you see your number one priority as a council going forward? Like what do you see as something you would like to achieve as a council in the near future? It kind of goes back to the goal session, but it's also along the lines of I'll ask the question like, what's your priority? But let me give kind of an example. When I showed up as a city manager, my mayor at the time, Mayor Michael Cape, great guy, since retired. He basically came in and said, your number one priority in this city is to fix my water infrastructure. I don't care how you do it, fix my water infrastructure. That is your goal. We have a project that we started and we funded under USDA, and it's stuck. It's been stuck for 2 years and no one knows how to untie this accordion knot. Your job is to fix it. I don't just get it done. And I spent 2.5, 3 years untangling that knot. And we're now in the final construction phase of that project. That was my one goal. Everything else was great, but this is the one thing my mayor and my committee saw as their primary objective. So that's kind of so that's how I'm addressing that question. What is it? Infrastructure? Is it roads? Is it?
Almost similar to what you just said, we have aged water and sewer systems that we're trying to work on and see how best we can fund improving those systems. So that's, in my opinion, that's a high priority also.
Okay. That makes sense.
Any others?
Well, I might just throw out, I think we all have somewhat similar priorities and some that differ. And I think the challenge that is before this commission right now is, I think what Commissioner Reed was alluding to a little bit earlier was at the beginning of the year, I said over the past couple of years, we've heard about a lot of need within the city
Mhm.
across a broad spectrum of the community, whether it's public safety or infrastructure or housing or homelessness, lots of need out there. Limited resources.
Right.
So we've got to sit down as a group and try to prioritize we can't accomplish them all. So we've got to start working toward accomplishing what we can.
Mhm.
But we haven't had that discussion. So your question is one that we need to have. So I appreciate it.
And I would just add, if I might, I think, you know, as one of the people who campaigned more recently at the same time as the mayor, I heard over and over again the critical importance of essential city services.
Mhm.
Notably, what people consider an essential city service, it varies. However, I think we can agree, you know, the water and the sewers, what have you. I think it's balancing, maintaining high quality city services, which we know is important across the board, with how do we move forward into the future? How do we ensure that Helen is a place people want to live and do business and recreate? And that's where I think some of these conversations, you know, what is an essential city service? How do we maintain it at a high standard? And how do we add in all the other things that are also very important?
And I would add to that as all awesome thoughts and comments. One of the things I heard yesterday and one of the conversations I had was the transit, your bus system, for lack of better words. I was trying to think, they actually used the name as like the Helena Transit Authority, whatever it is, your bus service, and how that is converted from a bus system to now a on-demand direct delivery process. And it's still only 85 cents a mile or a ride. That's an essential city service you need to pay, but if that's bleeding you dry in the general fund or somewhere else because you can't afford that, then the conversation may be, yes, that is essential city service, but how do we pay for it? Do we get grants? Do we unfortunately have to raise the rates? Or do we have other processes that we need to do, reduce times, capacity? So those would be the conversations I think that the staff represented by me in this position, as well as the commission, would need to kind of hammer out as to what that looks like going forward. If that's, as you mentioned, commissioners, that's an essential city service the city wants to continue. It may be regionalizing it with in cooperation with the county in East Helena, or it could be going back to a more a bus system, but as on a 3-day-a-week basis or something to that effect. But those are the conversations that may be necessary going forward. So I appreciate that, and that's good to know. So,
Thanks for bringing that out.
but is that bad?
Very good.
Nice to meet you too, ma'am. Sir.
Thank you. Workforce, lack of housing, lack of childcare. This isn't just mutually exclusive with Helena, it's everywhere. But the city can't fix all of these problems. It's helping us find where can the city of Helena be best positioned to help with this, like with housing. Is it building infrastructure, figuring out ways to pay for sidewalks? This is something I keep hearing constantly, are sidewalks. But also too, how do we leverage the tools that we have, like the ArcGIS, to identify empty lots, or we can do some infill with housing, or we could work with developers to use that system. Permitting, being better business partners with our businesses, our nonprofits, et cetera, because from everything from sidewalks to our trails, these are ways that our people get around in our city. But finding where we can be those best partners, because we can't all play the role of, builder, et cetera, or like the quarterback. We all have our own roles, and helping us identify that role and then moving forward, whether we lead or at least push from behind on some things. So I think that's what I'd like to see too, is how can we help fix from our end.
And a lot of that comes down to prioritizing in the goal setting, the idea, it goes to the strategic plan as well as what can you best do, and then how do you integrate all those other little components into it, as I was mentioning with the environmental resolutions that you have. It was mentioned in the paper that one of my colleagues mentioned that these are we need to rethink these, or maybe get rid of these. I don't think that's necessary. I think that's something that you may need to modify them or just incorporate them in other processes I mentioned. So as you build infrastructure out, you're putting in the environmental friendly portion to it. As you're improving infill, you include the workforce housing as part of the deal. So if a developer comes in and they want to build that, build a 60 room housing development, it includes a certain percentage of workforce housing. But to get to that, because there's no bumper sticker simple solution, to get to that, we may need to sit down and look at our processes. Department heads and myself working together to try and figure out what are our best practices that can stay, because if they work, I don't feel the need to fix them. Or some things that over the last few years, these have fallen by the wayside. All we just need to do is re-implement them and they'll be good to go. Or these are ones that have just been broken for years and we just kind of limp along. Can we finally, shoot it and put it out as misery and start over and work with the staff on doing that? And in that process, you figure out, okay, these are the things that we can do. These are the best practices we can undertake. And then we slowly move forward. I don't feel the need to come in and just drop in a whole bunch of changes, but you kind of need to figure out what the processes are and then fix those and then prioritize through there. And I think that's where my one mayor came in very well. He's like, your priority is the water infrastructure. Once we can get the water fixed, then I have piping and I have capacity to then put into development to improve the housing, and I can address this issue. So that's all. It's a big spaghetti dish of concepts, but there are a lot of different processes, and I'd be happy to help the city accomplish those things in the close conjunction and coordination and with the support of the staff, making that happen and empowering them to do so.
All right, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you.
and we'll go over this and you will hear from us. Do you have anything you want to?
No, I think we'll have a break, and then at 3:30, we're gonna have the leadership team come in and.
Come back in here. Okay.
Same place.
So
At this time, according to our process, we must entertain public comments. So are there anybody online or here? for Public comments.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Okay, then we'll move forward. Is there any final comments from the commission?
No, sir.
No, sir.
This time the meeting is adjourned.